At my wedding, my parents wore black mourning clothes. The string quartet cut out mid-measure. The clinking of crystal champagne flutes stopped dead. 150 guests froze in their seats, staring in absolute silence at the arched mahogany doorway of the reception hall. My mother marched down the center aisle draped in pitch-black fabric, complete with a dark widow's veil shadowing her face. My father trailed right behind her, his head down, wearing a stiff black funeral suit. My older sister flanked them on the right, clutching a thick leather folder against her chest. She wore a tight black dress and a smirk she could barely keep hidden. My mother bypassed our table entirely and stepped directly onto the stage. She grabbed the microphone from the stand. Her voice echoed off the high vaulted ceilings, dripping with a toxic, heavily rehearsed sorrow. "We will stay right here until you sign this house over to your sister," she announced to the silent room. My sister stepped forward. She held out a silver pen and laughed, a sharp, delighted little laugh that cut straight through the dead air of the venue. My husband calmly stood up. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small black remote, and pointed it at the massive projector screen hanging behind us. What flashed on it made them run out of the venue. To understand how a mother justifies wearing a mourning veil to her living daughter's wedding, you have to look at the cracks in the foundation of the family. You have to rewind to the moments when the rot finally bleeds through the expensive wallpaper. You have to understand the exact kind of person she was trying to break. My name is Victoria. I am 32 years old, and I spend 12 hours a day sitting in a windowless room, answering 911 calls for the county dispatch center. I talk people through the absolute worst, most terrifying moments of their entire lives. I handle screaming, panic, violence, and pure chaos for a living. The job forces you to build an iron wall around your nervous system. Nothing rattles me. Austin, my husband, always jokes that I have ice water in my veins. He is the calm, unwavering center of my world. A man who matches my quiet energy perfectly. But dealing with life or death emergencies at work is entirely different from facing the venom sitting in your own living room. My older sister, Oralee, treated my life like her personal thrift store. She was 29, the undisputed golden child of the family, and newly engaged to a man whose family practically owned the city's real estate market. Her upcoming wedding was going to be the social event of the season, funded entirely by my parents' endless desperation to appear wealthy. My wedding, a modest gathering we were paying for ourselves, was treated like a minor inconvenience. Oralee operated under the delusion that everything I owned was simply waiting for her to claim it. I walked through my front door on a Tuesday afternoon after a brutal overnight shift. My coat was halfway off my shoulders when my heart slammed against my ribs. The hallway closet gaped open. My storage boxes lay scattered across the hardwood floor. I rushed into the bedroom. Oralee stood in front of my full-length mirror. She held a carved cedar box in one hand and a vintage pearl and sapphire jewelry set in the other. It was the only thing my late grandmother had left specifically to me. Oralee held the necklace up to her throat, admiring her reflection in the glass. "Put that down." My voice was dangerously low, carrying no warmth. She rolled her eyes, not even bothering to look at me directly. "Relax. Victoria. I need something old for the ceremony. Preston's mother is wearing custom diamonds. I can hardly show up looking like a peasant. That is not yours to borrow." I stepped forward and held out my hand. "Give it back." The front door clicked shut down the hall. Heavy footsteps echoed against the floorboards. Martha, my mother, marched into the bedroom. She took one look at the jewelry in Oralee's hand, took one look at my outstretched hand, and instantly turned her rage on me. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Victoria, stop being so dramatic." She crossed her arms, her lips pressing into a furious, tight line. It is a bunch of dusty old stones. You are a selfish, cold-blooded wretch making a scene over absolutely nothing. Your sister is marrying into high society. She needs this to maintain her image. What do you need it for? You sit in a dark room all night wearing a cheap plastic headset. You are a low-level phone operator. You have absolutely no use for high-end jewelry. My jaw clamped shut. The sheer audacity hung in the room, thick and suffocating. The air felt so thin I could barely draw a breath. I turned my head toward the living room. My father, Robert, had followed my mother inside. He sat on my sofa, flipping casually through a golf magazine. He heard every single word of her vicious attack. I stared at him. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to tell his wife to stop tearing down one daughter to elevate the other. I waited for the man who was supposed to protect me to finally do his job. Robert slowly turned a glossy page. He let out a long, heavy sigh without lifting his eyes from the paper. "Victoria," he grumbled, his voice thick with lazy annoyance. "Just let your sister have the necklace. Why do you always have to start trouble and give your mother a migraine? Just be the bigger person for once. Let her have it so we can have some peace in this family." Looking at my father, slouching on my couch, choosing his own comfort over my basic dignity, a switch permanently flipped in my brain. His silence was a betrayal all its own. Enablers are the silent architects of abuse. They build the stage, hand the abuser the microphone, and then complain about the noise. I stepped forward, snatched the cedar box straight out of Orly's grip, and pointed to the front door. "Get out of my house." They left, muttering curses and slamming the door behind them. The damage was permanent. I was completely alone in that family, and that realization was the exact armor I needed for what came next. The following Tuesday, Martha marched into my kitchen unannounced. She did not bother to knock. She slammed a thick stack of embossed vendor invoices onto the marble island. She demanded I take out a $50,000 personal loan immediately. Orly's wedding budget was stretched incredibly thin, and according to Martha, it was my biological duty to fix it. I looked at the papers. I looked at her entitled, expectant face. I slid the invoices right back across the marble. My answer was a single syllable. "No." Martha snapped. Her hand cracked across my left cheek with blinding speed. The sharp sting blossomed across my jaw, radiating up to my temple. Before I could even blink, her fingers tangled into my hair, yanking my head backward. She leaned in close, her breath hot and frantic against my face. "I gave you life. You owe this family everything, you ungrateful brat. You will do exactly as I say." I stood perfectly still. My breathing remained slow and steady. My dispatcher training took the wheel, turning my own mother into just another hostile, unpredictable subject on the other end of the line. I stared dead into her eyes. I did not blink. "Elevated heart rate," I stated, my voice icy and entirely clinical. "Dilated pupils, tremors in the hands, rapid, shallow breathing. Classic signs of an out-of-control abuser losing her grip on reality. Keep hitting me. Mom." The 4K security camera mounted right above the fridge is capturing every single frame in high definition. Martha dropped her hand like she had grabbed a handful of broken glass. Austin walked through the kitchen archway just in time to see her stumble backward. She immediately clutched her chest, forcing a dramatic, ragged sob from her throat. "She is plotting against me." "Austin," she wailed, pointing a trembling, perfectly manicured finger at my face. "Your wife is a monster." She scurried out the front door, leaving behind a trail of cheap perfume and desperate, pathetic lies. Her sheer desperation bothered me. The physical assault was an extreme escalation. Even for her, it was far too reckless. That afternoon, I bypassed the usual county office run. One click on the public property records portal brought the truth crashing down into my lap. A newly filed quitclaim deed glared back at me from the bright screen. It transferred complete ownership of my grandmother's home directly to Orly. Sitting right on the signature line was my name, forged in a looping, panicked cursive that barely resembled my actual handwriting. My stomach plummeted, but the panic lasted exactly 3 seconds. I kept digging. One layer deeper into the county filings exposed the sickening, undeniable motive. Attached to my parents' primary address was a massive default notice from a major lender. Martha and Robert had entirely drained their home equity line of credit. $350,000. Completely gone. Evaporated. They had secretly bankrupted themselves to fund Orly's endless string of failed boutique businesses, designer wardrobes, and luxury vacations. The bank was closing in. Foreclosure was imminent. My house, fully paid off and sitting on prime real estate, was the last clean asset left standing in the family. They were going to feed me to the wolves to save their own skin. They forged the deed to sell my home and cover their massive, humiliating debt. A normal person would call the police immediately. A normal person would hire a lawyer and send a cease and desist letter. I did not want a quiet, legal victory. I wanted them backed into a corner so tight they would never be able to show their faces in polite society again. The next afternoon, I walked into Orly's favorite upscale coffee shop right as she stood at the counter waiting for her iced latte. I stopped a few feet behind her. I pulled out my phone, dialed Austin's number, and spoke loudly and clearly into the receiver. Yes, I understand completely. I will see the bank appraisers this coming Monday. I have the original deed locked in the safe for their inspection. Yes. Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Perfect. Orly froze. Her shoulders went completely rigid under her silk blouse. The color drained out of the back of her neck. She did not turn around. She grabbed her cup and practically sprinted out the door. The psychological trap was perfectly set. If an appraiser checked my property records on Monday, the forged deed would trigger an immediate, catastrophic fraud investigation. Martha and Orly would face federal prison. Their only way out of the trap was to get my genuine legal signature on a new document before the weekend was over. They needed to override the fake signature with a real one to legitimize the transfer, and my wedding was scheduled for Sunday. They had no choice. The ticking clock forced their hand. They had to walk straight into my venue, in front of everyone I loved, and try to break me. The heavy, suffocating silence in the reception hall snapped me straight back to the present moment. My mother stood on the stage of my wedding venue, the microphone gripped tightly in her black-gloved hand. Her performance was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She spun a tragic, deeply twisted tale for my friends, my in-laws, and my coworkers. She wept openly, dabbing at her dry eyes beneath the dark mourning veil. She painted herself as the heartbroken, long-suffering matriarch, completely destroyed by a greedy, ungrateful daughter who refused to save her own flesh and blood from absolute financial ruin. "We will stay right here until you sign this house over to your sister," Martha repeated, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. "Do the right thing, Victoria. Save this family. Look at your sister. Look at what you are doing to her." Orly stepped right up to the edge of the stage. She thrust the silver pen out toward me across the empty space. Her smirk practically carved itself into her face. She truly believed her own hype. She expected me to shrink. She expected me to cower under the crushing weight of 150 staring eyes. She expected me to scribble my name on that leather folder just to make the public nightmare stop. That was always their strategy. Create a scene so horrifying, so embarrassing, that I would surrender my own boundaries just to restore the peace. Austin squeezed my hand. His grip was steady, a silent, unshakable anchor in a room spinning wildly out of control. He stood up to his full height. He raised the small black remote. One click. The 10-foot projector screen behind the stage flared to life. The hum of the cooling fan cut through the silence. The stark white light of the projector hit the back of my mother's black veil, casting a long, jagged shadow across the wooden floorboards. The first image dwarfed my mother and sister. It was the original property deed, stamped by the county clerk, leaving my grandmother's house strictly to me. A low murmur rippled through the tables. Austin clicked again. The forged quitclaim deed filled the screen. My counterfeit signature sat next to Orly's printed name. Next to it was a bright red fraud alert and a massive, bold caption I had added, "Forgery." The murmur turned into a sharp intake of breath. The pity my guests felt for my mother evaporated instantly, replaced by horrified realization. Austin clicked a third time. The screen shifted to a massive bank default notice. $350,000. Addressed to Robert and Martha Rogers. The ugly mathematics of their secret bankruptcy hung over their heads. Whispers started instantly. People were doing the math. The narrative was collapsing in real time. Martha's head whipped toward the screen. The trembling victim vanished, replaced by pure feral panic. She gripped the microphone until her knuckles turned stark white against her black gloves. "Lies!" Martha shrieked. Her voice cracked, echoing harshly off the walls. "She is a hacker. She doctored these documents to ruin us. Look at her." She pointed a shaking finger at my chest. "Throw him out!" she screamed, gesturing wildly at Austin. "Security, get him out of here right now. She is trying to steal our home. She is a liar. She has always been a liar." The room shifted. Guests exchanged nervous glances. My mother's absolute conviction created a tiny crack of doubt. Martha took a step forward, riding the wave of confusion. She thought she could outscream the evidence. Austin pressed the button one last time. The final image snapped onto the screen, a high-resolution screenshot of a group text message between Martha and Orly from 3 days ago. "Push her at the wedding. She is weak. She will sign it to avoid public humiliation. Then we sell her house on Monday to pay off the bank. We split the cash. She will get over it." The collective gasp sucked all the air out of the room. The murmurs died, replaced by a wave of absolute disgust. It was the sound of a reputation dying permanently. I walked forward, stepped onto the stage, and pulled the microphone from Martha's frozen hand. She let it go without a fight. "You thought I was naive." My voice was dead calm. "You forgot exactly what I do for a living. I handle criminals, liars, and extortionists every single day. You did not come here to mourn. You came here to rob me. And you were arrogant enough to bring your extortion plot right into my venue." I pointed left. Right in front of the sheriff sitting at table 4. Martha's jaw dropped, all color draining from her face. Her eyes darted toward the man in the dark suit standing at table 4, the silver badge clipped to his belt. Orly's smirk dissolved into sheer terror. The pen slipped through her trembling fingers, clattering onto the stage. The guests stared in absolute revulsion. My mother and sister were paralyzed. Their trap had snapped shut on their own necks. Sheriff Davis shoved his chair back, walking toward the stage with the undeniable authority of a man ending a crime. Martha snapped out of her paralysis and lunged for the side exit, violently shoving a caterer. Glass shattered. The sheriff intercepted her, clamping a hand around her wrist. Martha thrashed like a wild animal. "You have no right!" she shrieked, kicking his shins. "She is my daughter. It belongs to me." Davis twisted her arm behind her back and locked the steel cuffs onto her wrists. The metallic click was deeply satisfying. Orly collapsed, sobbing hysterically. Her wealthy fiancé, Preston, stood up looking nauseated. He marched to the stage, yanked the massive diamond ring off her trembling finger, and walked out without looking back. Orly wailed, begging him to stop. My father, Robert, tried to slink toward the patio doors to abandon them and save his pride. Two groomsmen stepped into his path. Robert withered, staring at his shoes, finally exposed as a coward. Minutes later, deputies escorted Martha and Orly out in handcuffs. Robert trailed behind them, a broken, humiliated shell. The venue sat in stunned silence. Austin smiled, wrapped his arm around my waist, and nodded at the DJ. The music kicked back on. I raised my glass. A massive cheer erupted, and the celebration finally began. The judge's gavel finalized the absolute destruction of the Rogers family. 9 months later, a brutal fraud trial proved the evidence was irrefutable. The judge showed zero leniency, sentencing Martha to 5 years in the state penitentiary and ordering a $42,000 restitution. O'Reilly dodged prison by instantly turning on our mother. The judge didn't buy her victim routine, handing her 4 years of felony probation and 1,000 hours of community service. Her high society dreams evaporated, and she now works the late shift at a discount retail store. Robert faced the harshest reality. The bank foreclosed on the estate, and the sheriff evicted him. Abandoned by his favorite daughter when the money dried up, he now rents a tiny apartment above a bowling alley. His cowardice cost him everything. The social fallout was unmerciful. They were expelled from their country club and banned from their church. They traded my sanity for their public image, and permanently lost both. 6 months into my mother's sentence, a frantic 4-page letter arrived from the state correctional facility, a masterclass in hollow, narcissistic manipulation. She wrote about her declining health, blamed the economy, and demanded I beg the parole board for leniency. She said it was time for me to act like a dutiful daughter and bring her home. In the past, that letter would have paralyzed me with guilt. This time, my pulse remained flat. I fed the letter directly into the paper shredder and ignored her entirely. Total indifference is the heaviest consequence you can hand a narcissist. My life is entirely different now. I spend my weekends in my safe home with Austin and true friends. No one demands a sacrifice. I surround myself with people who protect my peace. They are my chosen family. If you are carrying the crushing weight of a toxic family, hear me clearly. Manipulators rely entirely on your silence. They use your decency as a weapon, assuming you will always fold to keep the peace. Enablers like my father are the most insidious poison. They choose their own comfort over protecting the victim. The people who stand by and tell you to keep the peace are actively helping the abuser load the gun. You have to rewrite the rules of your own survival. Rule number 1. Blood is a biological accident. Family is an earned privilege. A shared last name isn't a free pass to destroy your mental health. If their loyalty only appears when they need something, burn the bridge. Rule number 2. Empathy is a finite currency. Stop spending it on emotional vampires. If they only love you for what you provide, cut off the supply and watch how quickly they become strangers. Rule number 3. Weaponized competence is the ultimate revenge. You don't need to scream. Just document the truth. Stay stone cold. Let their arrogance build the gallows and hand them the rope. You have the power to walk away and never look back. If you are the reliable one carrying the burden for toxic people, I have a question for you. What boundary are you going to draw today? What are you finally going to say no to? Drop your story in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe. Your peace is worth protecting, and your life belongs entirely to you.